If everyone can wait another 10 seconds. Okay, Kim, we are officially live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Friday, June 19th Special District Advisory Committee meeting. I would like to start off the meeting by moving to slide 2 and ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise, place your hand over your heart, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all.
Thank you for that. I actually like the echo, get to hear it repeated. Can I ask for the roll call to be called by the secretary, please?
Kim Thorner,
Present.
Julie Nygaard, Gary Arant, absent.
Here.
Oh,
Gary's here.
Jack Beebe, absent. James Gordon,
Present.
Fred Cox,
Present.
Bill Hayner,
Here.
Tom Kennedy,
I'm here.
Cheryl Landrum,
Here.
Albert Lau, absent. Hector Martinez,
Here.
Mike Sims,
Here.
Mike Sims,
Here.
Mark Roback, is absent. Augie Scalzitti, Joel Scalzitti,
Here.
Bob Thomas, is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you for that. Do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment on the line?
No, I don't believe so, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, can we move on to the executive officer report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning,
morning.
committee members. Obviously, a different approach to doing business in this world, but I did want to note, as the agenda provided, we are live casting this meeting on YouTube. And while there's no formal public hearings of any kind, it's certainly up to the chair's discretion at any point if you want to check in with staff to see if we have any comments that have been received by email. We certainly can do that. And for the public that is watching us on YouTube or even on Zoom, but I imagine for the most part on YouTube, the instructions on how to comment live is provided on the agenda face sheet, and it involves an email to one of our staff members. But that said, the agenda is what it is. We don't have any needs to reorder anything, Chair, so I will turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. And if we do get public comment, we'd like to entertain those if you do receive them during the meeting. Okay, thank you. With that, we do have a consent calendar with 3 items on it. They were contained in your packet. I would be looking for a motion on consent, or if anyone wanted to pull an item from consent.
I'd move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Anyone wish to pull? No? Okay, with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, do we have to do roll call or can we just say aye? I know in my board meeting, everything via Zoom on Brown Act has to be roll call. Can we do it?
We can give it, given the nature of the advisory committee, we
don't
can
have to.
Simply motion.
Okay, so then speak loud and clear then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, with that, our consent calendar carries. Thank you. We are on to the business of the meeting. First item also in your packet is the adopted 2021 work plan. I know all of us are looking forward to getting forward to 21. With that, I will turn this over to Keen for presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So if you go ahead and I have that one slide for this item, but committee, this is our opportunity to check in before the new fiscal year gets going, to let you know of the projects that this commission has formally adopted as its game plan for the upcoming fiscal year. And certainly I'll defer to the staff report for the details. And up on the screen, you can see kind of the key points. Certainly, everything we do at LAFCO is premised on first and foremost addressing applicant proposals as they come in. And right now, we've got a good number of proposals, as Linda and Robert's staff report in under the consent calendar identified. I think we have close to 24 proposals on file. I've highlighted 4 that are of more significant nature, which are going to take up some of our time at staff. Certainly Rainbow and Fallbrook, separate but related proposals to leave the Water Authority is going to be a staff resource dedication. But we also have filed proposals to reorganize County Service Area 135 and to extract and establish a standalone fire protection district. We have a proposal now on file as of this week, I believe, from Valley Center Community Services District to go away and in its place create a dependent county entity, a new county service area to assume park and recreation services in the greater Valley Center region. And then we have a standing proposal on file from Jack Beebe and the good people at Fallbrook Public Utility District looking to expand their latent powers to get in the business, among other things, of park and recreation services in the Fallbrook area. And that topic of latent powers is going to be somewhat of a theme for us in this meeting in a couple of different areas. So with that premise said, committee, the commission then has identified 26 specific projects that it wants to tackle separate from our proposal workload. They are oriented in priority from high, moderate to low. High being the top 10 projects. Those are the things that we definitely want to put all of our resources into. And that includes a number of municipal service reviews. What is different this year, committee, than past years, and even when I came to the committee a few months back with a draft work plan that I was looking for feedback on, is we're essentially hitting the pause button, if you will, in terms of starting new municipal service reviews. We have found out by practice that the service reviews take a little more time, and to be able to do them right by the eyes of the commission, we really need to budget no more than 5 to 6 a year. And so essentially, all the service reviews that we did not get done this year, we are simply forwarding over to next year. And that means the review of the Fallbrook Rainbow region, resource conservation services. And I make comments on those two because Linda and Robert are going to cover those a little later on in the agenda. But also picking up on our reviews for Vista, Escondido, San Marcos. These are the things that our staff is going to be focusing in on during 2021. And then we have a couple of policy updates, which are also going to be, again, the subject of some more discussion later on, and highlighted by tackling LAFCO's need to update our ag policy, and then this very unique issue of special district latent powers. So that, in broad strokes, is our game plan for the next 12 months. This is an opportunity, committee, for you to provide us some initial feedback before we either start initiating the new projects that we have penned for the year, or for those projects that are already underway that we are carrying forward into the new fiscal year. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions or to put things on our radar before we start releasing things to the public. So, Chair, with that said, I will take your lead if there's questions or if there's a desire for a little more details.
Okay, but before I open it up for questions and comment, just a point of clarification. So on, you have an applicant proposal from Fallbrook Rainbow, and then below that, you also have a high priority level, the Fallbrook Rainbow MSR. And do you believe those things would happen simultaneously, or is one a condition precedent of the other? Or did you just accelerate it because the detachment proposal came in?
So that's a good question. So they are certainly related, and we are syncing them so that the MSR is completed first. And I know Robert is going to go into a little more detail in a bit on those proposals, but to that comment, one of the things that we're trying to do with the service reviews is to incorporate outside applicant interest into these projects. So one of the things that comes out of it is Jack and Tom, who both have proposals tied to the completion of the MSRs, don't have to bear the financial cost of an MSR. And again, under statute committee members, anything that is of substantive nature in moving a sphere of influence requires an informing municipal service review document. LAFCO either will prepare that document every 5 years or so, or if the applicant is under his or her own time constraints, they can fund the preparation of the MSR. What we're doing is we're taking on the cost and labor of the MSRs, but we're asking applicants then to hold off on submitting proposals or waiting for those proposals to be heard until staff gets done with these reviews.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, I would like to open it up for comments and questions. If you know how to do it. Oh, I said raise hand. Mr. Hayner, you raised your hand. Why don't you go first?
Okay. Item number 10, multiple community wastewater systems located throughout San Diego County. I wonder, Keen, if you could just give us a quick update. It says completed, but what exactly was that?
Hi, Bill. You're actually looking at this year's work plan, which is our update to the committee as to the things the commission prioritized for 1920. That project has been completed. That was Linda's municipal service review of the sanitation district. If you take a look at page 26, which is item 6A, you'll see the adopted work plan for this upcoming fiscal year.
Mr. Sims.
Just a comment to Keen and his staff. That's an ambitious work plan, and I commend you on setting a high goal, especially since you guys are down an analyst and still taking on a lot of work. So kudos to you.
Any other comments or questions? Keen, do you know where you're going to be in September of 20?
I'm not quite sure where we will all be in September of 2020, although I'm sure this is a question for all of you. We're kind of getting used to this Zooming. So it wouldn't surprise me if, despite whatever the orders are, that we may stick to some kind of video meeting enhancements going forward. There's some rough edges, but it's proving to be a little easier than I thought. I don't know if the committee has a different take on these things, but when we come back to the committee for our September, I would assume we'll do a virtual.
I was referring to the lease, the office space with the county. Hopefully they renew with you, but I'll also offer that I'm enjoying the Zoom meetings. My secretary and I found that I'm saving like 8 hours a week in travel time. because all the meetings are down in San Diego, and that is valuable time. Do definitely miss the interactions with people one-on-one though.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments or questions about the priority of the rankings or any of the work plan? Does anyone have anything that they'd like to add?
No.
No. Okay, and it does, I concur with Mr. Sims. It does look very aggressive. All of these are important. I appreciate the way you rank them with the applicant proposals first and then the other high priorities. Okay, so with that, there are no other comments or questions on item 6A. All right, well, the committee will be here to support you this year, Keen. I noticed you have rule number 4 up there. You have the ag plan up there. So we're looking forward to supporting you on all of those items throughout the year as you need us. All right, with that, we will move on to actually rule number 4, item 6B on your agenda. And we have looked at this before. Actually, I think we caused this, this committee actually caused this to be raised up as an issue. So we'll take policy update preview. Rule number 4, establishing district functions and classes.
Thank you, Chair. And this is going to be a team effort. I'm going to offer up some opening comments, and do go ahead and provide that one slide we have for the committee members. And then I'm going to ask Alex from Commission Counsel's office to weigh in a little bit. And then Robert is certainly available to kind of answer any of the more detailed questions the committee has. But this is a preview, committee members, of one of the policy updates that this commission has signed off on for us to deal with up in for the upcoming fiscal year. And as the chair mentioned, this comes directly from the committee itself. Many of you, most of you were here just a few months ago when we were dealing with an issue that was brought forward by Carlsbad Municipal Water District and a dispute that they had identified in their dealings with the Acadia Wastewater District with respect to who should be providing retail recycled water to the La Costa Resort. And of course, in going through this dispute, it became evident, certainly through the committee, that the policy that we have in place could do better in providing not only agencies on the ground, special districts direction, but bluntly, staff as well. And so what you have up on the screen is a little context. The idea and issue of latent powers for special districts has been an issue for LAFCOs for many, many years and decades. But it wasn't until 2001 where it became an explicit issue for LAFCOs in terms of regulating. So from 2001 and on, and Alex can speak to this in more detail, the function, or I should say the task in state law to designate and empower special districts to say, this is the service function and this is the type of class of service you can provide consistent with your Principal Act, falls on LAFCOs. That said, we have an existing policy, rule number 4, that really spans 2 distinct decades or periods. Half of the policy was written in 1975 and reflects that time and era of municipal service provision. And then the second part of the policy, rule number 4 again, was an attempt in 2001 to kind of address the new task of LAFCOs being explicitly responsible for regulating this function, as well as overseeing divestitures. Before 2000, it was very unclear in state law if special districts could on their own just simply say, we want to get out of the business of doing X, right? From 2001 and on, it's now very explicit. If a district wants to distinguish a particular active service function or class, it needs to go through LAFCO. So that said, one of the things that certainly got highlighted in our review of Leucadia and Carlsbad was, among other things, the table that was created that's reflected in our policy, our matrix table of certain services, functions, and classes is outdated. And one of the key examples of that is recycled water. There's no clear distinction of recycled water, at least not in current modern terms. And so, among other things, this is one of the issues that we are going to be working on as we try to update and modernize our policy to make it holistic and to make very clear what are the policy procedures at this LAFCO in terms of A, designating each special district's service functions and classes, and then B, what is the mechanism to do that? And what is the mechanism to change those? Those are the big picture goals of the policy update. I'm bringing this to you today, A, so you are aware that this is on our radar. B, we're doing this in part because you collectively identified this as a need. And C, what role would the committee like to play in this update? Would you like us to work on a draft and come back to you? Would you like to create a committee? All options are on the table. With that, I want to give a little time to Alex to talk about this policy update and just to really affirm some of the ground issues that LAFCO needs to address one way or the other. And then, Chair, we can open it up for questions. And again, I know I'm going to defer a great deal to Robert Barry on some of the details. But with that, if Alex, if you're available, and we could put the screen or the slide down so we can all see each other. So with that, Alex, do you have any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Keen. Just a couple of points. The first being the role of LAFCO in this. So under Government Code Section 56375G, LAFCO is authorized to adopt written procedures. Those include written definitions consistent with the existing law. So we're tasked with basically defining what our services and functions are so that we can exercise those latent powers once individual districts apply to the commission to exercise them. In reviewing Article 4, I noticed that it hasn't been updated since 2008. At the end of the document, it refers to the 2008 update as a holistic, or rather a comprehensive update. But I'm not sure that's the case because it looks like there's some carryover language from the law that existed before CKH in 2001. In addition, there's a number of citations that are incorrect. So we'll have to update that in this version to make this a usable document. And lastly, it seems like if you read through it, there are a number of, I think, a number of inconsistencies and a number of what at this point might be redundancies, especially in sections 4.5, 4.6, regarding identifying what special districts, what functions and services special districts offer. So with that, I hope we can both clarify the language here, make it more useful for us going forward. And I'm happy to hear how we consider this.
To you, Chair.
Okay, we'll have some discussion on it. I just want to briefly review, I think it was a subcommittee of Bill Hayner, Jack Beebe, and myself that worked on the original Carlsbad-Leucadia thing, where we kind of came to this issue, and we actually had a call with Keenan and Alex about rule number 4 and reclamation being under sewer, but not water, but a lot of water providers actually provide recycled water. And so I am wholeheartedly supportive, I think, of updating this, and also legally, right? Because it has not been updated. One of the things that we came across last time, and I think Keen listed it as a bullet point, was that because services have been historically provided by some entities, but they may not be matching up to what's in rule number 4. You have the issue with grandfathering. And this is what we ran into with the Leucadia Carlsbad issue, in that Leucadia had been providing the services for such a long time, and the entity had actually invested millions of dollars. And so one of the things that I would like is, as we move forward on this, is I don't know that you can necessarily put it into rule number 4, but in some instance in the consideration where LAFCO determines the powers and services of entities, the acknowledgement of this grandfathering in over time, especially for entities that are pre-1975. So I would hope, and that would be my request, is that whoever looks at this, whether this end up being a draft by staff and then it comes back to us, or if we get a subcommittee working here, that we do look at that grandfather provision and how to, if somebody has an old-fashioned phone, how to actually address it. So with that, I'd like to open it up for comments and questions. The first hand I see is Mr. Kennedy.
Thanks, Kim. I think you're right with regard to the grandfathering and the challenges we saw with the Leucadia Carlsbad thing. When we start on this policy, hopefully we can try to look a little bit into the future. Now at the state level, there's a lot of policies development being done in regulatory work on both indirect and direct potable reuse.
Yeah.
For wastewater systems. And there's also a push from the state to eliminate ocean discharges. So you're likely to see a lot of wastewater plants start producing potable water through just treatment processes. So I think trying to decide whether wastewater agencies should be granted the power to distribute potable water at the retail level should be considered pretty carefully, because I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to become a reality. And so we'll have to figure out whether we want to say you can create the potable water, but you can't retail it, because there's certain other regulatory schemes that the water industry is regulated under that are different than the wastewater industry. But that'll be a fine line to cover.
That was the very end of the report from Jack and Bill and I last time, was that the issue that water entities are regulated heavily as far as water loss reporting requirements, and acknowledging that reclaimed water used to be a waste, and now it is a resource. It's liquid gold, either through the recycled direct or indirect, and how you match those up is going to be a challenge. All right, yeah, great comment. Other folks who have comments, Mr. Arant, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. This issue was raised in our recently completed MSR. And the comment that I have at that time, and that I would have for any further consideration of this rule, is that Valley Center is an inland discharge agency. We have no connection to a land or ocean outfall. So every gallon of wastewater that comes to me has to be reclaimed, recycled. We don't do that as trying to enter into a new world. It's just a matter of that's our method of disposal. And needless to say, we look for all opportunities to distribute that water to areas that are suitable for the use of reclaimed water. So I think there needs to be a distinction when we start looking at this rule, a distinction between agencies that elect to get involved in recycling versus agencies that is their method of disposal. So I hope that's considered. It was raised in our MSR and to be dealt with later. So I just want to get that consideration out there as you start to look at this rule.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Oh yeah, Mr. Berry.
Just to provide some context to the committee, in 1994, the law changed and LAFCO was required to survey the agencies to find out what were the active services that were being performed. The comprehensive update in 2001 required LAFCO to survey all agencies to get them on record for what their services were being provided, so that we could understand what their active services were and then understand what their latent powers were. At that time in 2001, activation of latent powers was not a jurisdictional change like an annexation or a detachment. That didn't change until 2008. That's why that was the last comprehensive update to the rules, which established the activation and divestiture of latent powers as a jurisdictional change like annexations and detachment. So we've surveyed the agencies a couple of times between 94, 2001, and the last round of MSRs to have them on record to understand what services have been grandfathered as active services prior to 2001, and then understand what services would be available to the districts as latent powers moving forward from there. So the update in 2008 with the divestiture activation was because there was a whole new section added to CKH about activation and divestiture as a jurisdictional change, and that was incorporated into our rules. So the issue going forward is that we already have all of the agencies on file in terms of what their active service provisions are. One of the quirks about the Leucadia Carlsbad issue is they were both water districts. And in the past, we've somewhat differentiated between the distribution rights of water districts, which sanitation districts typically don't have, versus the production of recycled water and secondarily treated water that needs to be either disposed or used as a commodity for recycled water. So the other big change since '94 is that recycled water is a commodity now. And so instead of trying to literally get rid of it through disposal, injection, ponds, et cetera, now it's a commodity for sale. And so the difficulty that we've had is trying to differentiate, similar to water, in terms of the retail wholesale relationships, how we deal with the recycled water producers versus the distributors. So Leucadia Carlsbad, again, was an odd circumstance because we weren't dealing with a sanitation district and a water district. We were literally dealing with two water districts with inherent rights to distribute water. So the retail wholesale relationship was not established under our rules. That's part of what we're trying to do, is extend the retail wholesale relationship under our rules for water to recycled water to reflect that it is a commodity now. And it is something that the districts are working together to create unified infrastructure and distribution abilities beyond just disposal. But we want to accommodate all of those options. Our existing rules do include disposal for injection purposes, et cetera. What it really doesn't reflect on is the wholesale retail relationship now that recycled water is a commodity. So I think the catch up that we're trying to do is to really establish that moving forward, to recognize that the active services include a retailer or a wholesale recycled water component as part of the update to Rule 4.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Sims.
Yeah, just a question for staff, maybe. I understand that the evolution of water districts has kind of been the catalyst for this Rule 4 update that's needed. Are there any other special district categories that could benefit from this update or that need updates? Or is it mostly focused on the water district evolutions?
I have some initial thoughts on that. And yeah, I think they all merit review. Mike, your field, when you look at our policies, it just contemplates structural as a function. But what about the distinction about advanced life versus basic life? I'm not saying that that's a class that we want to make a distinguishing factor on, but I think this is the opportunity to ask out loud, what are the defining distinctions of classes that fire, resource conservation, wastewater, parks and rec provide? And let's see if it makes sense to put it in a matrix table. And then as we go through the MSRs, my own goal, I was talking about this earlier with Alex, my own goal is so the MSRs become the instrument to identify where classes merit formal change, that there's some need. And going back to what Tom was saying, and we'll certainly defer to the special districts for their expertise in this, but it's a dynamic evolution of how these services are being provided. All I know and all what LAFCO staff knows at this point is the table from 1975 is probably not helping us.
Yeah.
So Kim, I had a question.
Okay, Bill.
So I guess all the districts were surveyed for what services they provided back in 2001. And then in 2008, the latent powers activation and divestitures part came in. But has a survey been done more recently? Because in the last 12 or almost 20 years since 2001, I'm sure a lot of agencies have increased services and that sort of thing.
I do not know. Mr. Barry?
Yeah, basically every MSR cycle starts with a questionnaire that's sent out to each of the agencies. And part of the questionnaire is to provide an opportunity for the agencies to identify any services that they would like to be providing, and also to confirm the services that they are actively providing. And so every MSR that we do is prefaced with a questionnaire of the subject agencies to cover those issues, plus any changes, any pipeline projects that would affect their spheres, anything that we should be addressing on a local level that they're concerned with through the MSR or the sphere update. So there's a multiple opportunity for those services to be identified. But the critical element is that any of those services that were not identified in 2001 for those agencies as an active service are considered latent powers that need to be activated by approval of LAFCO. So if any services are being provided that haven't been inventoried back in 2001, it's an issue for us because the law has changed in terms of the need for LAFCO approval for those services if they were not grandfathered from being provided prior to 2001.
Do you maintain a list by agency? I wonder if you could send one to Whispering Palms, just so we could look at what's on our list and not on our list.
We have a catalog of all the agencies and inventory in our office that covers the 94 survey, the 2001 survey, as well as the most recent MSR survey. So we have a compilation of the active services, we understand them, that the agencies have been providing prior to and post 2001. And I'd be happy to send that to you, sir.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments, questions, anyone on the call? One of the things that kind of jumped out at me when I was listening to Robert and Gary speak was that maybe there's a differentiation, and I don't know if we look at this, but reclamation for disposal purposes where you're mandated, right, as a wastewater entity where you're inland and you need to find a way to treat and dispose from the wastewater plant, and then reclamation as a commodity, which many of the water agencies are actually looking at. And I think that might go into your retail versus wholesale. But as I'm looking at the 4.4 classes and service functions, there probably is a good opportunity for some clarification in that chart, not just of water and sewer, but I did not realize cable television could be a latent power. So anyways, any other comments? Mr. Rant, and then Mr. We'll go Mr. Rant, Mr. Hayner, please.
Yes, Chair, that you captured my point very well. It's just that I think that the notion that we're pursuing providing another service that we didn't acquire latent powers for does not fit in our situation. It is part and parcel to providing wastewater, which is a current power that we are allowed to do. So thank you for your clarification.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hayner.
Yeah, I noticed in many cases, there's an economic issue here. So just take the disposal of wastewater products. The cost of moving it from and having it moved from our plant to some other location has changed dramatically, gone way up because they have to truck it further away and all that. So we have entered into the recycle business, let's call it, locally where we can distribute some recycled water in our area. So, you know, I don't know about other districts, but it could be hit with some challenging economic issues if they don't figure out other ways to deal with what they've got.
I agree. Maybe you want to talk to the water agency. We'll partner with you.
I know. I might.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments? So one of the questions that Keen asked us up front was the desire to maybe have a subcommittee work with LAFCO staff on this, or was the preference for, after the discussion today, to ask LAFCO staff to come up with the draft and then bring it back to the full committee? Is there a preference? It was a subcommittee that got us into this trouble in the first place, but that's a good thing, right? It was a deep dive with LAFCO staff. Any preference? Mr. Scalzetti, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think let staff come up with something and bring it back to the committee. It's
Okay.
kind of streamlined, and I think the subcommittee gave them some good direction and some
Okay.
good insight on where we're going, and bring it back, and I think we all can kind of chop on it.
I agree.
If I could throw one more thing. The services that we have in Rule 4.4 have to be somewhat comprehensive for all districts. And so we cover everybody from single service districts to things like CSDs and CSAs that can do almost anything a city can when given the authority. So some of those services, the cable TV, for example, communications, have evolved obviously since '75, but we're trying to capture the services that are available to all of the agencies through their principal acts. And so every agency is a little different as far as what those latent powers are as available to them. But cable TV, communications, et cetera, a lot of that's the public utility districts and CSDs and things that we have to incorporate into our rule to cover all agencies.
That was something that jumped out at me. I saw telephone communications and I didn't see Wi-Fi or 5G or anything on that. Would that be something that you would also expand?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, okay. All right.
They're calling it broadband service. I mean, those are the type of things that we're trying to capture. And I think the feedback that we get from the committee is really going to be helpful to make sure that we're covering all the nuances of the different services and making sure that we're not leaving out any active classes that are being provided or are available through the latent powers.
Okay. All right. So like I know for Liebenhain, we do hydroelectric at multiple sites, and I see power generation distribution. I don't see hydroelectric. I don't know how far down into the details you need to get. Is having this as comprehensive as possible beneficial? Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Especially to differentiate the types of services like retail, wholesale, or if an MWD is providing hydroelectric services or not. We know that they're available, but what it means is that another MWD that wants to provide that service has to request LAFCO to activate it for them.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have everybody else on record of what their services that have been provided prior to and post 2001.
Okay. And then last question, regarding the grandfathering in of functions that other entities have had for a long time, would that be reflected in 4.4, or is that just something you handle when someone comes in and requests the actual like say someone says I want to do recycle water, do you address it there, or do you actually write the grandfathering provision into 4.4?
My understanding is the grandfather provision is just a term that, for the caveat in CKH in 2001 that allowed for previously provided services. So because they set that deadline that anything provided prior can continue, we just had to understand what those services were at that time moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. All right, with that, it sounds like the committee is asking for staff to come up with something and we will discuss it at a future meeting.
Yeah, so I think the game plan on our end would be to give some update come your September meeting and then have something firm for you at December with the idea that then we spend the next 7 months of the fiscal year working out the details in order to get something to the commission for their approval by, let's say, April or May of 21. So I think the input provided is very helpful. As Robert said, we cover a lot of different types of districts. So I'm guessing a good portion of this committee's feedback will be on how LAFCO's staff, at least out of the gate, attempts to create classifications for each of these broad service functions. So again, thank you for your input, committee.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no more hands raised, thank you for the report on that. And we are now moving on to item 6C, which is the subcommittee report on agricultural and open space lands preservation policy. Mr. Simons, can I kick that to you to kick this one off?
I will certainly start it, Chair. And again, so this is just your subcommittee, which includes Chair Thorner and members Kennedy and Beebe, our report back on what we've been up to since March. And of course, March is when the committee saw staff's attempt at revising our agricultural and open space lands policy. And the immediate response was, variations of angst, some moderate angst to some more elevated angst. And so we're still certainly in the process of getting the subcommittee's feet on the ground on this topic. I will say, and I'll defer to members Kennedy and Thorner on this, the key, I guess, friction right now, and friction might be a more aggressive term than appropriate, but LAFCO has a job to do, right? In statute, we're tasked with protecting or preserving, whatever word you like better, agricultural and open space resources, and preventing the premature conversion of those lands into other uses. So part of this issue is us trying to quantify and or qualify what is LAFCO really trying to get at when we say something is either a mature conversion or a premature conversion. While at the same time, and this is from the feedback that we've already received, and I think the subcommittee has really honed in on this, not trying to discourage new ag uses. I'm sure there's some good marriage to be made in balancing act there, but that's a tough balancing act. On the statute side, protect and preserve ag, and then from the subcommittee's viewpoint, don't cause harm and discourage new ag uses. So there's the balancing act. The subcommittee is starting to weigh in on that, and let me defer now to Tom and Kim, your thoughts on how we're going forward on this.
Tom, what, as the high angst member of the committee, would you go first?
High angst. I was just channeling my inner Gary Arant, and Gary and I have talked a lot about this. The challenge, as some of us in the rural areas feel, when people downtown try to figure out what's right for the people out in the far-flung areas, things usually go awry. But the reality of ag in our region is that the land use policies aren't the problem. You're not going to save ag by saying land can't convert, or that once land is converted to ag, it has to stay ag. Ag's decline is related to primarily water costs and labor issues, and then foreign competition in case of avocado. We had talked about a number of ways to modify some of the language in the document that was produced, and I think there's a happy medium there. Thankfully, this will only come up if something gets to LAFCO. And in the normal land use planning scenarios, if someone wants to convert something that used to be ag land to houses or whatever, and unless there's a reorganization or some sort of jurisdictional change, it never comes across LAFCO's desk, so it probably won't have that much impact. I think, though, that the one thing that we would like to get in there, as I mentioned when we discussed it, is that how long does a grove have to be dead before it's no longer ag land? Because we've got lots of those around here, and they're not coming back. The land isn't really well suited. This isn't the Central Valley where there's row crops and seasonal crops. These are tree crops, and nurseries are basically what we've got. So I think defining what ag land is, you'll disincentivize someone converting land to ag if you make it to where they can never convert it back. And I'll defer to Gary. He has other thoughts on this.
Tom, you covered it well. You channeled me well. I really have nothing else to say other than I agree with what you just said because
Holy crap.
So, we don't want to discourage people to get in the ag business for fear that they'll have to go through some long bureaucratic process at LAFCO to convert it back to residential use or commercial use.
And we
That's
did
the
discuss
caution.
that. We did discuss that as a subcommittee last week. And one of the things, and I think it's in the analysis in the staff report, the concern of the policy previously prime and ag land, and now you're talking about all ag land. And so one of the things that we thought was that maybe having some type of, and King calls it a disclaimer or sunset, some type of disqualifier that would be allowed in there so that it wouldn't discourage landowners from utilizing their land as ag business. And so the subcommittee is tasked with working with staff to come up with that so that it doesn't do what Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Oran are concerned about. And discouraging landowners from utilizing it for land for ag business so that it always gets stuck there, even if it's dead. We did also talk that at some point we needed to bring in other stakeholders. I think the Farm Bureau was a natural stakeholder to bring in. And then Keen also mentioned the Sierra Club. And so our thoughts at the subcommittee level was we would come up with this Tom says no, come up with this sunset disclaimer, some qualifier in here, and then meet with those other parties to get their input into the policy. So
yeah, absent some sort of sunset, you're essentially turning all ag land into open space.
Can I provide a little bit of context?
Yes, please.
We've had this policy on the books for many, many years. The primary use of this policy is to inform the land use authorities, the cities and the county through their development approval process, what they need to cover for LAFCO through their CEQA review. That's 99% of it. It's just basically to announce to the land use authorities what issues we need them to cover for it to be germane to our responsibilities. And that way we can adopt their MND or their EIR or whatever it is. We try and get that information to them as early as possible through the local approval process, because any conversion of land use is going to occur there way before it gets to LAFCO. So what we have heard consistently from the counties and the cities is that we need to get that information to them as early as possible in their environmental review so that they can factor it into their process. By the time a proposal gets to LAFCO, it's already gone through the tentative map development review. It's already gone through CEQA review. It's already gone through its CEQA legal challenges. And then by the time it gets to us, all the agricultural conversion issues have been addressed through that process. We put pressure on the local governments to address those issues because LAFCO is prohibited by law from regulating land use. We cannot control the conversion from ag to other uses, but we are required by the law to prioritize and acknowledge it, and also to provide comments to the local government for conformance to our legislative priorities and policies. So we are not in a position to determine land use conversion whatsoever. It is primarily the cities and the county in particular that control that designation. We work closely with them and provide the policy to them to help them understand what we need to do, because the requirements under CEQA for ag conversion are not the same as the CKH requirements. So if we don't ask them early on and give them a policy to respond to, they will not address our issues. And then once it gets to us, we have to deal with it without any land use authority or mitigation ability. So it's a critical thing for us to have this policy for the local land use authorities to understand what we need from them and how we fit into their process. It's not really them conforming to ours as much as giving us the information that we need. And so the ag policy is really meant to highlight what our priorities are determined by the state legislature that we are required to identify and address in these proposals. But I hope that context helps a little bit, because again, the policy is not meant to be adversarial. It's meant to be helpful to the land use authorities.
Thank you for that. And just to note, the opening purpose is the preservation enhancement of open space and ag lands. So
And that's under statute, that we're required to address those. The language discourage is literally in the statute. It's not a staff use.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments, questions, or input for the committee and or for staff on this issue? No. Okay, so as it is, Keena, I think we have a meeting coming up on this soon, yes? With, I think I have a save the date on my calendar.
You've got a save the date meeting with the committee where we're bringing in Hannah from the Farm Bureau. We'll get Hannah's thoughts, and then irrespective of Mr. Kennedy's head shaking, we will do the same with Sierra Club afterwards. And then I've engaged the building association. They may or may not want to weigh in on this. I think they're kind of testing the waters, but I'm guessing by September, the committee will provide this, the subcommittee will provide the committee some substantive draft of where our mind is.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh, Cheryl, you had your hand raised.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
Now you're good.
Thank you. I was wondering, number one, if the meeting your meeting might be open to the public. We're working on a project that is right in line with some of these issues. And also wanted to let you know that if you needed help on the committee, I'd be more than happy to help or send someone from my staff. We're working with the Farm Bureau as well on a project where all of this pulls together.
I would defer to Keen on that, but I would say we did talk at the committee level last week that the more involvement up front, the more transparent input we can get, the better end product we'll likely end up with. Keen, are you okay with that, having one more committee member?
Chair, you're the creator of the subcommittee, so that's fine with us.
Okay, then yes. All right, I didn't realize that. Yep, then we're good. Yes, we'd love to have you join. We'll get you that information.
Democracy now.
Mr. Robeck, you joined us.
Oh yeah, I've been here a little bit.
Okay. All right. With that, we did add a member to the subcommittee, and we'll have the meeting with Farm Bureau, Sierra Club, and possibly BIA, and come back to this committee in September. All right. Any other hands up? Nope. I just seeing none. We are now on to 6D. Which is an update on active MSR. There is not a hard copy in your packet. It's not a written report. I believe it will be a verbal report.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. So this is just an opportunity, as we have done in the last year or so, of giving the committee somewhat of a soft preview of the things that we're working on with respect to certain MSRs and highlighting some of the policy issues that are starting to develop for us. So there are two service reviews in particular that staff has gotten enough traction on that I think we're in a position to give a verbal report. And again, for the benefit of sunlighting issues and getting some feedback along the way. So we've got both Linda and Robert have separate service reviews to highlight Robert's Fallbrook Rainbow region, and then Linda, our resource conservation services. So I guess because I'm looking at her, I will defer first to Linda, unless you want, Linda wants to defer to Robert and do the presentations.
I am good with going first, and if Stu can pull up the slide, that'd be great. Good morning, committee members. I'm just going to give a brief update on the MSR progress with the Resource Conservation District and our objective. So before you is a map with all 3 RCDs in the county. This MSR basically is going to highlight an independent macro level evaluation of services and capacities, of course, as well as assessing potential governance structure alternatives to enhance resource conservation efficiencies within the county. That's because that's your volume.
We're just working on a little, if you mute yours and mine's on, what happens?
Okay. 1 second. We're all in the same room, so we're still figuring it out.
We can't hear you.
We're just gonna have a little bit of echo. I'm almost done, so sorry. The RCDs are tasked with managing a diverse range of projects under Division 9 of the California Public Resources Code, such as soil and water conservation, invasive species control, habitat enhancement, education and outreach, and much more. Before you is a map of Mission Resource Conservation District, Resource Conservation District of Greater San Diego, and Upper San Luis Rey Resource Conservation District. We have this draft tentatively set for the August commission hearing. And I am open for questions.
Do we have any comments or questions on the report?
I see Kim speaking, but I cannot hear her.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, everyone else can hear me.
Yes.
Tom, go ahead.
As part of your review in the Upper San Luis Rey RCD, I know that there was some questions. I know that the San Luis Rey Indian Water Authority, I believe, posed a question related to their latent powers concerning groundwater management, and whether because they are asserting status, or at least some groups up there are asserting status under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, rather than dealing with the county, which those folks up there didn't want to use the county as the underlying agency to comply with SGMA. They're having the RCD, the San Luis Rey RCD. I'm not sure if that's part of your evaluation of the Upper San Luis Rey, and I'm not sure if I thought they had sent that to you, or maybe they sent that letter to the State Water Resources Control Board. Gary, do you recall what they did with that one?
No, not offhand.
But it is a question that if you could, because they are asserting to one extent or another that they have legal authority to manage groundwater in that region. And I'm not sure if that's on their list of latent powers. I don't know, Cheryl might know what the latent powers are for water resource conservation areas.
To my understanding, we have not received a letter from them. However, I have been talking with the board at Upper San Luis Rey RCD and getting updates for them on their progress with the groundwater sustainability plan. They have issued an RFP looking for a consultant to collect that data and research. I'm not sure if they have made much progress, and I see Gary's hand up.
Tom, we've been tracking SGMA for some time, and we're aware of the changes that are going on with the GSA designation. The Indian tribes are a bit different than the public agencies. We know San Luis Rey MWD is in that area, and that's part of the Fallbrook review that I'm working on, and I'll mention in a moment. But we've been tracking the GSA aspect for some time now as the law has changed and it's been fleshed out. So it is something that we're aware of and we'll touch on with the Upper San Luis Rey RCD, as well as San Luis Rey MWD and all the agencies along that watershed.
I think on 2 points with the Upper San Luis Rey RCD, they were participating in the GSA, and I think the question the tribes have raised is that they don't qualify as an agency, a land use agency, or a water management agency to participate. So that's one issue. The other point, I know LAFCO is all about governance and eliminating committee, special districts, and all that stuff. And consolidation is always the best thing you can do. But at the same time, I really want you to think about service provision. The Mission Resource Conservation District has been providing irrigation evaluation services since the early 90s when we had the 90-91 drought. They're under contract with the Water Authority. They were instrumental in securing a $1.5 million RCCP grant for additional on-farm services. So when you start looking at the governance changes or consolidation of the RCDs, making them all one, it may not necessarily be the best route, only if, though, that you preserve the efficiency of the service provision that we see from the Mission Resource Conservation District. They've done an outstanding job. They're very responsive, doing a lot of work in Valley Center and Rainbow and Fallbrook and Uwima. So really be careful about that. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when we do a restructuring of the RCDs. We lose the effective services that have been provided by Mission Resource Conservation District.
Okay, Gary,
Thank you, Gary. We are very aware of that, and we actually have hired a consultant to help us quantify the RCD deliverables and really shed light on, you know, the demands, capacity, and performance. The consultant we're working with is a former RCD GM from the Solano County, as well as his wife, who was the executive director of the California Association of RCDs. So we've really benefited from working with them, and we should have a very parceled, compartmentalized report of the deliverables and really understand what are the challenges besides a limited tax base in funding, and how much of a reliance they have on the grants.
Well, I think you'll find that there is a great deal of reliance on the contracts and grants. Like I said, the Water Authority just finalized a $750,000 contract to continue the irrigation audits, and not just for agriculture. They do irrigation audits for large commercial operations and down to residential. So they do
as
provide
well as
a very
private
effective
landowners.
service. And they've been very effective at continuing those funding sources.
Okay, I think Ms. Nygaard has had her hand up for a while. You're muted. She's saying goodbye. Okay, goodbye, Julie. All right, Gary, I have to call you out on your first comment saying that LAFCO is all about eliminating special districts. I would beg to differ, and especially this LAFCO is about efficient organization and delivery of government services. So I definitely wanted to, and I'm sure that that's what staff is working for. All right, with that, we're gonna go on to I think
we'll talk offline.
We'll talk offline. Okay. All right.
You can mic up.
We'll move on to Mr. Barry. I believe you have the next update on the MSR Fallbrook Rainbow.
Yes, actually, there's 3 updates going on. Fallbrook Rainbow, the San Marcos region, as well as the Vista region that are all concurrently being worked on. Right now, the Fallbrook region is the priority given the circumstance with the County Water Authority, in addition to some of the other local issues along the 15 corridor. So right now, most of the active MSRs that are going on are in North County. And as Keen mentioned, we have an ongoing MSR with the Escondido area, the 2 I'm working on, San Marcos and Vista, and then Fallbrook and Rainbow. So the 78 corridor and the 15 corridors are really the 2 areas that we're looking at the most right now. That's really where most of the new development is occurring and most of the proposed new development. As well as a lot of the issues that we are working out in terms of CWA boundaries, conversion of agricultural to residential, et cetera. From our previous discussion, it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from one of our former commissioners, Bill Horn, who was a LAFCO member for over 25 years, and also a local grower, a local farmer. His quote that I will never forget was, "If I'm not growing avocados, I'm growing apartment buildings." And I think that speaks to the pressure on ag in the North County that we're trying to reconcile in the relation to the need for housing, for urban services, especially along the transportation corridors, as well as preserving the agricultural areas that we have under our priorities and our policies and law. So with the Fallbrook area, we have some maps just to kind of show the position of the agencies and the area that we're reviewing. And again, just for context, LAFCO is required every 5 years to review all the spheres of influence of the agencies under our authority, cities and districts, and to update them as necessary. So that process under law that we're required to do on a 5-year cycle is preceded by a municipal service review. So we can't do a sphere update unless we do a service review prior to or at the same time. So the service reviews that we're doing cover a laundry list of issues from service adequacy and capacity, future projections, governance issues, financial ability, community services in terms of accountability. There's a number of things that we are required to evaluate for each of the agencies. And so some of the difficulties is trying to take all of the multi-service agencies that we have and fit them into the static 7 determinations we're required to make. So each area has its own local issues. Each area has its own service provisions and relationships. So the primary thing going on in Fallbrook, and the subject agencies again are Fallbrook PUD, Rainbow MWD, North County Fire Protection District, as well as San Luis Rey MWD. And those agencies provide water, sewer, recycled water, fire services, as well as groundwater protection and management services with San Luis Rey. So we've got to basically create a snapshot of the service provision at this time in terms of capacity adequacies, as well as projections moving forward, and then make 7 written determinations on all of our required determinations that precede our sphere update, which require another set of determinations to update the sphere. So with Fallbrook Rainbow, obviously, I think everyone's aware of the ongoing proposals with the detachment from the County Water Authority and annexation to Eastern MWD, a Metropolitan Water District member in Riverside. Those proposals are obviously very controversial and are going to take quite a bit of work to flesh out the details. I would think more in particular, the financial impacts to the remaining agencies in CWA. We've yet to really heard what the divorce settlement terms are going to be, and we're just starting that conversation. So that should be fun. With North County Fire, as well as the other fire districts in the area, we're really looking at the new relationships through mutual and auto aid agreements, especially in the unincorporated areas with the fire authority and their efforts to become an independent fire district moving forward. So I've been in touch with the fire chiefs in those areas as with the fire authority in North County. And we are going to work out those evolutions of relationships with mutual and auto aid in terms of identifying them in this round of MSRs and addressing dispatch zones in addition to the other aspects of mutual auto aid with fire services. For fire sewer or for water, sewer and recycled water services, all of this area is in CWA apart from San Luis Rey. So we'll be talking a little bit about the San Luis Rey issue and their potential integration into CWA moving forward, and also the long range projections for the MWD, given the groundwater responsibility changes under Sigma and the groundwater sustainability efforts going forward. With San Marcos and with Vista, again, we're looking at the same issues. Vista provides sewer through Buena Sanitation District. San Marcos really does fire services through San Marcos Fire and land use planning. Most of the other services are really provided by special districts like Vallecito's Water District for water and sewer, Vista Irrigation District. So at a sub level, we're looking at the relationship between Vista Irrigation and Vallecito's Water as far as the water and sewer services in San Marcos and the Vista areas. And then also looking at the pockets of unincorporated territory between Escondido, San Marcos, and Vista that are somewhat isolated, but yet have a relationship with those cities and districts. In addition to that, it's really trying to technically update our sphere boundaries to parcels now that we have the GIS ability to get down to the parcel level with those boundaries, and also provide the agencies to give us any input or feedback on adjustments to those spheres, given that most of them were adopted 30, 35 years ago. So a lot has changed in that time period, politically as well as services, growth, and the paradigm moving forward is really we need housing. There are active developments going on in the transportation corridors, and we're trying to connect all these dots so that the long-range planning syncs up for those peripheral areas, which is where LAFCO lives. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but that's really the approach we're trying to accomplish with the MSRs in these regions, realizing there's a lot of interconnectivity between these agencies in terms of infrastructure as well as traffic and housing, jobs, et cetera. So your feedback as a committee is really helpful to inform these reviews. And so we appreciate the opportunity to be able to discuss this with you.
Okay. I did see, I have two hands up already. I will offer, I sympathize with you about, especially about that comment about growing apartments. One of my favorite hikes is Montserrat Mountain up in the Rainbow area. And I would say 2 years ago, there were no houses, and every weekend I go out, there's like 10 new homes up there. It's amazing how quickly those are going up and the traffic impacts. So I had Mr. Kennedy to speak first, and then Mr. Sims.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Ryan.
Robert, have you had any success in communicating with the San Luis Rey folks?
Not really. I mean, again, we had a couple of proposals dealing with them. One was the Pamas tribe's detachment of a very large area. And then we also had a contractual service agreement with one of the Pankeys of San Luis Rey. But I have not had any personal contact with them. And a year ago, there was a lot of discussion as to whether they were going to continue with the district, given the GSA movements and to what degree they were going to be viable moving forward. So part of the MSR is going to bring that question to the table. But no, I've not spoken with the Pankeys at San Luis Rey.
Yeah, they did have items on their agenda last year about dissolving or dissolution. And my understanding, talking to Jack Hoagland, who I know a couple people on this meeting know, is that they aren't, they're stopping their assessments. And I just looked at their 2021 budget, and their revenue is zero. They're not passing assessments. Me and my executive secretary would go to the little shed they have they do their board meetings in and count the votes on their assessment every year. And we haven't done it the last couple of years. And so I think they're winding down. If you need Jack Hoagland's information, let me know. But, so as far as their viability and with Sigma kind of overtaking groundwater management, it's definitely something you probably talk to them about what they want to do, because they're just kind of burning through whatever reserves they have and not assessing anymore. There's no revenue and no employees, and it's just paying lawyers at this point.
What we understand is that they have an ongoing standby charge that they've been allowed to assess. If they've stopped assessing that and they're looking to become what we would consider an inactive district, part of the MSR and the sphere review would be to address the potential of who would be a successor agency or what the implication of a dissolution would be if they decide to dissolve the district. The bigger issue is they're out of the CWA boundaries. And so there really isn't a successor agency necessarily, other than the GSA designated agencies under Sigma that would move forward, or the landowner, groundwater rights that are carried over.
I don't know that's the case. I know that in a Liebenhain service area, there's land in the Liebenhain service area that's not in the CWA, and there are pockets of it around the county that are not within CWA. We have some other areas within our service area that are the same. So I think that it's not necessarily a requirement if you were, to be in the CWA.
No, I think what I meant to say was that when we're looking to dissolve an agency that has authorized powers, one of the issues is to address a successor agency that would take over the service to keep the entitlements going. But with groundwater services, it's not really a similar service. So with the Sigma and the change to the groundwater rights, it creates a different situation. But what we understand is that if that district dissolved, it wouldn't change the CWA boundaries. And so everybody in there is not entitled to CWA imported water right now. So it just kind of begs the question as to the long range water provision of that area, especially being so close to the 15 and the 76.
Yeah, at any time there was a project proposed, they would have to annex into MWD and CWA, pay all their back property taxes, just like the areas where Kim described those homes being built near where the Montserrat hiking area is. All those were part of San Luis Rey, and they were, I guess not forcibly, but they were detached out of there and brought into either Valley Center or Rainbow for provision of service. So, all right, thank you.
And those follow the development approvals and secret review from the county. And so everything is handled at that level and then comes to us for the annexation to MET and CWA. Also, under the Water Authority's administrative code, if we're annexing to a CWA special district member, they have to get those conditional approvals from MET and CWA boards ahead of the LAFCO action. So it's very complicated and it's very expensive to annex into CWA.
If they want imported water.
Correct. Yeah.
But if they want it, because you can be in one of our districts and not be part of CWA.
Correct. In fact, there's a lot of parcels that are in your district that are not getting services from you, that are paying CWA standby charges, et cetera. They're entitled to those services, meaning they don't have to annex to CWA, but they would still have to go through their conditions of approval to get the service from you guys.
Thank you for that. I have Mr. Sims and then Mr. Arant.
Thank you, Kim. Going back to Keen's previous comments about the Rule 4 updates, Robert, you're going to have the benefit of working closely with Chief Abbott there, one of my fire service mentors. He's a very smart guy, and I look forward to seeing what kind of Rule 4 fodder comes out of those discussions. I'm sure he's had a lot of good information to overlap with that project.
Thank you for that. Mr. Arant.
Yeah, just a little historical note, Robert, when you're looking into the St. Louis Ray, back in the early 2000s, when the relationship between Party and Rainbow kind of went on the skids, there was a lot of work done with St. Louis Ray actually being allowed to exercise lake powers of water and wastewater service. And LAFCO decided that, well, because there was two existing water agencies right around them, that probably wasn't a good idea. And I think the solution at that time, though LAFCO stopped short of this, the solution at that time was to take the land south of the St. Louis Ray and put it in the sphere of influence of Valley Center, and stuff north of the St. Louis Ray in the sphere of influence of Rainbow. So that's kind of the historical point there. And with Sigma, I don't think this St. Louis Ray actually provides a real purpose anymore to preserve its groundwater rights. So it may be ripe for one of those dissolution actions by LAFCO.
Okay.
Yes, agreed. One of the things is St. Louis Ray wanted to have their water service powers activated and become part of CWA at that time. They don't have any water distribution infrastructure or services. So that was denied at that time, but that was also based a lot on the fact that I don't think CWA wanted an additional member agency. So it was much more likely to annex to either Valley Center or Rainbow as existing CWA members than to establish a whole new independent seat on CWA for a district that doesn't provide services. So, but I agree, we'll be addressing Sigma with St. Louis Ray, and a lot of it will be their desire to either continue moving forward or their consent to be dissolved, so to speak.
One final comment, the only way Bill Horn could have built apartments on his property, and I know his property well, is he'd have to build them on stilts.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the MSR reviews that are currently pending? Okay. With that, we are on to item number 7. Do we have any committee member announcements? Does anyone have an announcement they'd like to make? If so, raise your hand and call. Mr. Scalzetti, you do?
Sure, I just wanted to update you on our advanced water treatment process. We came to agreements on our water purchase agreements and wastewater or treated water agreements with the JPA and the water purchase agreement with Padre Dam. Looking forward to submitting some LRP applications to the County Water Authority and then on to MWD in the month of July.
That's fabulous news. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Any other committee member announcements? Going once, going twice. All right. Oh, Mr. Roback. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. There you go.
You know, I've been thinking about Tom Kennedy a lot,
Well, make sure it's appropriate to share, please.
Oh, no. I was just thinking about the broader picture of efficiency and the mission of LAFCO. I was thinking 2 birds with 1 stone, philosophy, Tom, right? You can appreciate that, right? So why don't we also look at combining Fallbrook and Rainbow as agencies while we're doing all this? Tom, I'm just thinking out loud here, Tom. Anyhow.
I think we should do like Otay and Sweetwater.
Okay, we're gonna stop right now.
Serious.
A good thing everyone's muted because I can see you guys are all chuckling. All right. I think LAFCO staff will look for all efficiencies in government operation that makes sense. Do we have any other committee member announcements before we go? All right. So always I end my Zoom calls with rate my room. Who has the best and the worst room? Mr. Arant, you win for me because you have the California water map on your wall. Mr. Kennedy, you lose because I think that's Raiders paraphernalia on your wall.
I just
So-
had my.
It is not. This is my daughter who's in college bedroom. So.
Okay.
I just had my office remodeled expressly for Zoom meetings.
Thank you. All right. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their participation, their comments, and their input today. I also want to thank Du for organizing the Zoom meeting flawlessly. Thank you very much for your work today. And with that, we are now adjourned, and we'll see you all hopefully in September. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone.